Heyo, my Planet Coaster friends! Johnny5 Alive here, and welcome back to Sandbox mode. So originally I wanted to jump into campaign and play some more career mode, but I figured, you know what, I want to actually build something in Planet Coaster. You know, it's been a minute. So we're building in Sandbox here today, and I hope from this video you guys will learn something. I'm going to teach you my thought process, struggles, trials, tribulation, kind of a how to build in Planet Coaster style video, because it is quite a tricky game to get started in, and I know people get paralysis by analysis, and you know, it can be definitely challenging to figure it all out. Now, I did find that my past learnings and experience from Planet Coaster 1 to be very helpful here. As a result, I kind of went big on this build, where normally I recommend to people to start with a small shop, something tiny, and, you know, learn the pieces. And every small build you do, you learn something new, and you can kind of build upon that. And I feel like I already have a lot of learnings from Planet Coaster 1 that I could take into this game. The only downside is not knowing the pieces, and that's what you're seeing there is a whole bunch of different pieces lying about, because I needed to figure out like what's actually in this game that's kind of in the direction of what I want to build. And you'll also see some stuff at the back because there are blueprints from Frontier. They're tropical buildings and that sort of thing, so I could use them as reference. It's not, one thing I like to say is don't copy and paste. Copy with taste. So use other people's creations or even Frontier's creations as a reference point to give yourself ideas, to give yourself an understanding of how to use the pieces. What wall pieces did they use? What trim did they use? What's the corner caps on these pieces? What kind of pieces did they put on? What windows? What doors? That sort of thing. And that's why I put all those blueprints down, so I can get a better understanding on how the pieces are intended to be used together, so that I can come to that discovery much quicker on my own, or not having to come to that conclusion on my own. Just going straight to the source, figuring out what is the intention, let's go with that. And then, you know, later on, maybe we find a better piece that we prefer more. So all that being said, that is my thought process, that is my setup. When I'm starting a brand new build in Planet Coaster 2, it's similar to what I did in Planet Coaster 1. Setting up a big scene that has all of the pieces that I'm going to be intending to use, or maybe think I might want to use, getting them all out on the table on the Sandbox mode, and then all of the reference pieces that, you know, you can either find from the workshop, and in my case, I found them from the Frontier that are already in the game, and putting those somewhere so that we can look at them later while we're building. So I'll talk more about what I'm doing in a sec. You can just see what I'm building, a queen splash. That's basically what I'm doing, is I'm fiddling with basic shapes, trying to build a queen splash, and using basically rotate, duplicate over and over and over again to try to accomplish that. I had to make a bit of a Pac-Man sphere because I didn't want the smile sticking off of the sphere and rather have it embedded in the sphere. And I could not scale a sphere up large enough to make her larger than life. So instead I had to use the pipes and grab them all, duplicate, rotate, until I had a sphere large enough. So why am I building a queen splash? Well, what you have to ask yourself, what is it that you're inspired by in Planet Coaster? And, you know, go from there. So one of the things that brings me the most joy is that new Queen Splash mascot. I love her. I don't know why, she's so happy, and she makes me happy. And in Planet Coaster, people know that I like to plankify things, if you will. I like to play off of the already existing characters, brands, and things that are in this game, and just build upon that, right? So Queen Splash is technically that of like the tropical theme, because, you know, it includes like flumes and pools, and she's supposed to be the mascot of flumes and pools. And flumes and pools are most likely to be found in the tropical resort. So I feel like she's kind of like the tropical resort character, and I've already mentioned that I think tropical resort is technically my personal favorite theme, and it's underused. So going into a build, I was thinking, you know, I think I want to do a tropical resort build, And what better way to make a larger than life, very, you know, a build that stands out from the rest? None other than including a queen splash in some way or another. So going into my build, I kind of thought, like, what if I made a big queen splash and then made a lazy river go around her, and she looks like she's sitting in the pool in her little donut thingy, right? And I just thought that would be fun. And then it's like, well, what's after that? Well, I don't know. That is the core concept. So find your inspiration. For me, that was Queen Splash Tropical. All right, got that done. So we put down everything in the game that we thought we might need for this build. All the tropical pieces that we found interesting, all of the tropical scenery and blueprints that Frontier had provided and built inside the game. We put those at the back of the park so that we can look at them when we get closer to actually building those types of things. So that box is checked. Now, what is the big personality? What is the big key feature that's going to make your composition interesting and stand out from the rest? Well, that'll be Queen Splash, making a literal big splash. And we can play around with that. We can maybe add some flumes to it, some tiki huts, some tropical resort stuff, and we'll find a way to make all that work later. That stuff is tertiary, secondary, and less important than getting that main centerpiece down. So I figured once I have my Queen Splash, once I have my main attraction, my centerpiece, the thing that, you know, is going to give it that wow factor, I'll figure out the rest from there. And you know, there's definitely a lot of findings and learnings and things to discuss when we get to those parts, because I definitely had some struggles and turbulations myself because I started with such a big build. And again, I don't recommend going this big, and if I could go back in time, I probably would have started with something a little smaller, or I guess in my next one, I may do something a little bit more mild in comparison. What I'm building here is hands out of basic shapes. And you can see there's like that big Queen Splash. She's already in the game. She has that pipe going around her. I was kind of disappointed that, you know, they have the pipe version of her, but no non-pipe version. Because what's actually, if you look at Queen Splash in the game, she has a ring, a tube thing going around her, right? Like a dinghy, a tube. And for whatever reason, the statue version has a pipe going around her that's, I guess, supposed to represent that tube, but it's literally like a slide. And if you scale that up, yeah, you could get it pretty big. But I didn't want to just cheap out and be like, there it is, I scaled that thing up. It's not that good, and I really don't like the tube slide pipe. So instead, it's like I got to do it from scratch, and that's the whole reason for this. Yeah, I would have liked a shortcut if possible, but sometimes there are no shortcuts, and we just got to do things the official way. So I figured once I build her, you know, she's going to come in handy for multiple things. So there will be links down in the description below for 2 blueprints. The final blueprint that you guys will see here today that we're building in this video, and then just her all on her own. I think I updated it so she's 3 parts. Her legs are separate, and her body's separate, and the tube is separate. So if you just want her without the tube, you can pull it off. And if you want to change her legs, like make her walking around, you can do that. And then, you know, if you just want to reposition it all, you can do that as well. So it's a 3-piece kind of 1-part blueprint, or it's like one blueprint broken up into 3 pieces, and you can use it however you like, and it's just Queen Splash. So I'll have a link to that in the description, and if you can, I would appreciate a like and a rating. I'm at 4 stars out of 5. I'd love to get my first ever 5-star creation. And you can download her and use her whatever you wish. And I figured, you know, for me, building her serves a lot of purposes, because I'm going to use her in this next build that you guys are going to see, but I'm probably going to use her in a future build as well. Like, I would like to do an actual resort building, and I think I can, you know, I could use her as a centerpiece, a statue, or however I see fit. If you colored the whole thing gray, you could even make a giant stone version of her for like a mythology park. So there's going to be a ton of uses and reasons to use her again in the future. So I figured, why not? I made a Cosmic Cow in Planet Coaster 1, and I ended up using that thing like 10 different times. So, you know, This one's a little bit obnoxiously big. Maybe I'll consider making a tiny queen splash in the future. I think that would be fun, a miniature version, but I don't have a use or need for it at this moment. So that's her. That's basically the blueprint. It's done. She's sitting on her little ringy-ding thing in the middle of a lazy pond, and that's what you can download. But I didn't want to just make that the video, so I wanted to squeeze in as much as I can. So my apologies if it's a little bit fast. We're doing 10 times speed, but this is 9 hours of building broken up into, I guess, what is now like a 30-40 minute video. And then we'll jump into game and take a quick look at it later. But yeah, basically there's a lot of like zooming around and looking at things, and it's super, super fast. But as you can see, for the most part, I'm staring at one part, meticulously moving things, and speeding it up is definitely necessary for that purpose. I think in the future, I'd rather go a little bit slower, but there's just too much footage here. So what I'm building here is like a sign. Basically, I just wanted to make the donut Splash Emporium ring, making a splash as a sign, kind of symbolizing the ring making a splash, which was also my overall composition, because Queen Splash is on a ring, the same color ring, a pink ring, in a pool, and if I put a splash in front of it all, it'll look like a bigger version of that sign. So that's like the miniature version of my overall composition, and that's kind of what I was going for there. Now this is where you guys get to watch me struggle a little bit and learn from my findings and learn from my struggles, and you can see me jumping around, like looking at things and trying to figure stuff out. It's a big struggle, and I had the same thing in Planet Coaster 1. It's the hardest part to get started in a build, and one of the reasons I put it off for a while going into Sandbox mode and just played career and, you know, did a lot of spotlights. I didn't quite jump into the game as quickly as I did with Planet Coaster 1, because it's a bit daunting learning all of the new pieces. And I remember Planet Coaster 1, it was like small build, figure it out, and see what I should be using for walls and corner caps and this and that. Once you feel like you know all the pieces and they're kind of like memorized, and you're knowing which walls you want to use with which, you know, tops and roof pieces, building becomes a lot faster. And not only do you have to figure out the pieces, but then you have to figure out blocking it out. And you can see me blocking it out, and I'm not having it here. You know, I'm doing multiple different angled buildings with straight buildings, and I'm just thinking, like, how am I going to decorate the back side, the front side? Like, how do I want to wrap around this big donut circle thing and make a big composition, and then figure out like how all these roof pieces, walls, and all that work on top of this? So I was kind of struggling with how big the building that I was blocking out was in comparison to the ones that I see in the background made by Frontier. Once you take these, the tiki huts are quite easy to build, and they have some really good examples, but they don't scale up nicely. You can't like mass produce them quite as easily in larger shapes. And I think that's where I realized that part of the reason that I think Viking is so popular is because you could do these really big, giant builds, big Viking longhouses and stuff, and there's always a piece to kind of make it look nice. Whereas if you just have a thatch roof on top of a big building, it looks kind of clunky and bad, and then you got to figure out, like, how do I make this look nice? So while I did block out a building, I was like, this isn't going to look right. And then my thought process here was, all right, well, why don't we just like block out a roof and see if we can get the roof to look nice? And based off the size of the roof we make, we can fill in the bottom after, right? So I kind of reverse engineered it, and I was like, how big is this? Does it look good? And then if you put like 2 stories underneath it, will that look okay? And so I was like, all right, like I could see a composition coming out of this. It is a fairly large tropical building, and you're not going to really see these tropical tiki buildings go beyond a first story. I think second story, like I'm doing here, is kind of ambitious, and I'm curious to see if anybody in this community does even bigger than that. And with that being said, I do see the limitations of tropical, period. You know, it's going to be hard to make these big, giant buildings that look good. However, it's kind of smart by Frontier because they kind of did tropical resort. So if you want to go beyond floors 2 and 3 and and so on, then you don't use the tiki thatch bamboo build set. You use what you see in the very background there, which is the resort motel pack pieces, where everything's made out of concrete and you have these vibrant colors and that sort of thing. So if you're making small stuff, go tiki, and if you're making big stuff, go resort. And so I'm like, all right, like, learning all of that was, you know, I think good information alone, and that's definitely part of the Let's Build here, is conveying that to you guys, my findings and how you should approach it. I definitely don't recommend doing a tiki area like as big, or tiki building as big as the one I did here. But one thing to note, and this is a great tip for just playing the game in general, whatever you block out with your walls and your roofs, you can make good with just more is more. Enough stuff will make any box look great. And I learned that from Planet Coaster 1 by just starting with the most simple building. And I recommend trying this. Go with a 1x1 shop. Just one grid, 1 meter by 1 meter grid cube, 4 walls and a roof, and just decorate the crap out of it. Make a little garden out front, add a bunch of branding and theming and stuff like that, and watch how it evolves from a box to a something. Then go to like a 2x1 or a 2x2 or whatever, a 3x2. You can make it a little bit bigger, and then decorate the crap out of it again, and then see how you can make that look nice. And I know from my experience that no matter what I build, even if I don't like the shape of it to start, I will eventually massage it into something I like. So there is a discouraging nature when you're putting these walls up and blocking it out, where it's like, this just doesn't look good. Even here, I was like, I don't like these hard edges. I gotta round the back. And I'm like, can I round the front? Can I round the top? What happens if I round the sides? And it's like creating more shape and, you know, angles and stuff like that. And I thought, like, yeah, like, that's cool. What you see me do with the pool there, or the slides, I was trying to figure out, like, okay, I got this tall building, but is there something fun I can do with it that's representative of Queen Splash? And I think adding flumes is the obvious choice. So it is a tall building. It's technically 3 stories tall with how tall the last bit of the roof is. So maybe I can make a ladder or stairwell go up through the building, and the people go into the building, so it gives the building purpose for even existing. They go into the building, they go up, and then they can slide down. And I thought, okay, that might be fun, and it will actually clean up the composition a little bit. So all this negative space where on the inside where the building is, and it's looking a little bit blocky and cubey, when there's a slide or two wrapping around and going through all that, it will round out the composition and make it look more dynamic. So I wanted to just get a slide in there with the ladder and figure out how that's going to look and feel. And then figure out like what I'm going to do with the back, what I'm going to do with the shape, and then the shops. One thing going into this build right away, I knew it was going to be an all-in-one Splash Emporium. That's why I have the Splash Emporium sign. And then the next element was adding Queen Splash. But it should include a Emporium, which sells the floaties and all the pool stuff. And it should have dryers, it should have change rooms, it should have bathrooms, and it should have guest services so they could buy their pool pass. Then it should have slides. Should have Queen Splash. You start adding all that stuff together, and it's basically a tropical resort, right? And I'm like, all right, like that is a lot of stuff to fit into your first ever blueprint in Planet Coaster 2. So we're going big. But at the same time, like, what could I do that would be small and quaint? If I do a Splash Emporium, I could make like a little tiki hut Splash Emporium and theme the ever-living crap out of it. But Queen Splash is definitely too big to include in that. Maybe I could make a micro Queen Splash. So it could be used off the side of the pool. But generally where there's a pool, there's an Emporium. And where there's an Emporium, there's a change room and a bathroom and a dryer. So in my mind, I immediately jumped to the logical conclusion that the smartest approach here is to just do the whole tropical resort. Go big or go home. But it was a bit, it was a big of a tall task for my first ever practice build in Planet Coaster. There's a lot of things that you need to, like this here, like should I use corner caps and how does that look and how does that piece work and How do these two pieces work together? Does that look good? I'm trying things that I'm unsure that I even like until I try it and find out if I like it. And the bigger the build, the more things you have to experiment with. And maybe if I did a smaller version, I would already know what kind of corner caps and trim and side paneling I prefer the most. And I wouldn't have to make all these decisions on this build because I'd already know which ones I'm going for. And then on top of that, it's like now I got to do the windows, the second story, the back, the staff facility stuff, all the realism on the backside. And I'm just giving myself a lot more things to figure out and solve. And if you know, and I know I have overcome those things, and I knew I would just stick with it until I figured it out. But if you are new to the game and you make a mistake along any one of those decisions, you might end up not liking an aspect of your build or getting, struggling with it or getting frustrated. And that's why I always say to start small. But I knew for me, I would just figure it out even if I had to delete stuff, rip stuff down and rearrange things and try again. And I did that a lot. You saw me already delete the original shape of the building and restart. I started with the roof. And now you're seeing me try different trims and corner caps and pieces and that sort of thing. And I think I end up replacing some of them. And it's a lot of experimenting and seeing what you like. And the bigger the build, the more you have to experiment with. The plus side to all this is I got to really dip my toes in. I got to put my finger in multiple pies. I gotta literally dip my toes in and get a taste of everything, and I got to experiment with a lot of different situations. So, and even like the branding and stuff, like what pieces do we have to, put signs on bathrooms, signs on emporium, signs on, whatever. I got to do a little bit of everything there and bring awareness to myself on what kind of signs and branding and pieces are available for future builds. So I definitely learned a lot, experimented a lot, and as a result, any future builds that I do that are even half the size of this will come together much quicker, especially tropical style builds. So I had this idea. I have this whole thing with the ring, the pink ring, that it's in the Emporium sign. It's in Queen Splash herself. What if we put one down here and slide a slide through it? That might look cool in the composition. It'll add like an element of neatness to it, like a little wow factor. And I'm always trying to think of these like wow factors. What's a thing that I can do to either elevator creation through color design, running a flume through a donut, adding a giant Queen Splash in, all these different things you have to consider when you're building something, but they all just are layered on top of each other. Like I said, I started small. What is my theme? What is the thing that inspires me? I want to try tropical. I want to incorporate Queen Splash. Okay, that's done. What's the next thing? And now as I'm building it, what about the donut? What about the slide going through the donut? What about using blue and, light blue panels with pink flowering and white flowering, using the colors of Queen Splash in this? All right, we're adding an element of cohesive color theory to an already existing color theory or a color palette that exists in our main character in the centerpiece. So we're just bringing over the colors that are used on her into the actual build itself to give it a level of cohesion. And so it's like, that's my next kind of tertiary element. And it's like, how many of these little things can I keep pushing further to get it the way I want it, so that it all feels like it belongs and it all feels thematically a part of this overarching theme, which is the Queen Splash Tropical Emporium. And later on, it's like, well, what other elements of tropic can we add in? What kind of plants can we add in? And all those things will come later, but they keep elevating something that's already existing there. So what you saw me do there with the panels on the bottom, I went with blue and dark blue panels because it's part of like her splash crown. It's part of like her lagging color. But then by putting water across the whole bottom of the build, it almost gives it like this feeling of, it has like a pool going around it. Gives it that color of coolness. Then we can add in a couple splashes there. So now I'm just trying to figure out my water slide. Can I make this work? Is it a terrible idea? Before we go and like decorate our building and commit to this building, let's make sure that we don't have to delete anything or rearrange anything. You don't want to decorate something and do the polish phases before you're actually done blocking it out. So part of blocking it out is blocking out your slide and do we have a place to go with this? Does it work? And are we happy where the slide starts and where it ends? Like, what are we going to do with it? Do we drop them into the pool? Right? And as I was doing this, I realized, you know what? I don't think I want to drop the guests into the pool. And I did realize that giant toilet thing is the exact same size as the donut that I made for Queen Splash to sit in, which means you can have her sit in a giant toilet bowl if you want to use her that way. It's amazing. But yes, I didn't want the slides to go into the river because it's a lazy river and people are going to be floating around it on their donuts around her. And I don't want them splashing into people on the lazy river. So I came up with the idea of I guess I'll just do end it on the ground, on the wooden plaza. And then they just get up and walk. And I think that's a better solution, right? So I felt that was the better way to go. It's just a little tricky. At first I was trying to get it so my supports don't go in places I don't like them. Then I realized later that, you know what, the supports I don't like, if you select the piece of track, you could disable the support. So I was I'll deal with that problem later, but most of the flumes are actually on the building, so they're kind of self-supported already, and you can get away with deleting a lot more supports because it's kind of tied in and onto the building. So here we have to figure out a way to straight drop our people from the top into the building and through the donut. And that was an interesting task for sure. And another thing I didn't mention is I made the slides clear on the front because I didn't want them to obscure our logo and our signs. So if they're transparent, it literally doesn't get in the way of our logo and it helps hide it and blend it. Otherwise it's just kind of in the way there. Now this last little bit, getting this, I don't know what was happening here. When you do the exit to this flume, it is so finicky. Sometimes it goes longer than it should. Sometimes it goes shorter than it should. Sometimes it won't let you change the access. And I don't know, I wish you could just change the slider. So I'm trying to find a spot of which I can place the exit, just get it symmetrical to the other exit from my other slide. And if I can get them both roughly in the same spot, then I can just fix the slide after. And I figured I'll just work backwards, delete everything behind it, and then clip it in. And it still was giving me a hard time. So the slides aren't perfect. They're not exactly the way I would have loved them to be, but they work, and the guests love that singular slide. But the big one is supposed to be a ring slide, so you can slide down it in a dinghy, and that goes with the overarching theme again. It's if I'm going to do a slide, one of them has to include the donut. You have to slide down a slide in a donut. I mean, that's the whole centerpiece here. So now I'm just trying to figure out how I want to get the path to work in the plaza. It was a bit finicky, and the reason I was having troubles was I didn't realize that they were not perfectly flat to the ground. You can slide them up and down and adjust them, and that's what I eventually did. And here we're just doing more of that color theming. So I recolored the pool, and then I realized I messed something up on the pool and I had to undo it and then redo it. But yeah, we're using the same colors that we use on our splashes, the blues, the dark blue and light blue, and then the pink and white for our other slide. So I'm always trying to use this triadic color scheme that I have here. So this little hut that I kind of built and modified based off some of the frontier huts, I just want to modify it, change it, tweak it. I already had built one to the left there from scratch, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to end up adding pretty much all the same pieces to this just to get it to where it looks somewhat proper. So I was I'll just take the frontier one, delete a bunch of crap, change a bunch of crap, recolor a bunch of stuff, add my own things to it, and that is pretty much my own blueprint now. I've changed 60% of it, so, you know, the basic necessities, the windows, the walls, the colors was already there. Might as well just keep it that way. Otherwise, I'm just doing it myself anyways. It saves me a little bit of time. So we're going to be taking our little hut, turning it into a decorated bathroom, and using 2 of those for finishing off our composition. So yes, we came up with a color scheme, blue, white, and pink. We're trying to incorporate that everywhere. So you see that incorporated in the bathroom and the lights there. I did put a queen splash on top just to add like a little bit of flair. But then when you make it symmetrical, it looked a little off. So having her in the middle and on the sides, it's just too much. So sometimes less is more. And I got rid of them later in place of, I think, some crabs or something, which were a little bit more fun and playful. Very cool. So, once you're happy with the block out, which I got the slides in, I got the 2 bathrooms in. I feel like the composition is nice. And even though the building looks boxy, boring, plain, I know from there I can make any box look magical with just enough stuff. And I think, and after I feel like I've nailed my composition, I got my pools in, it's time to just do that stuff. And that's what the last little final stretch is. We're doing all the final decor. So you'll see me looking at other builds. I think this is a great thing to do. So see, I look at this build and I'm like, there's all this stuff. I like this stuff. I'm just stealing it. Like, okay, surfboards, a box of goodies. There's a box of things over there. There's like a canopy thing. There's planters that already have plants in them. Like, I can literally go find the planter and then put a plant in it. But why would I do that when this one has an assortment of 3 or 4 different in it already? It saves me from finding 4 or 5 different plants. So I'm just looking at all the other Frontier stuff. Like, what can I steal from you? What can I steal from you? You know, stealing 3 or 4 pieces that are already in a group is much better than manually finding those things yourself and putting them into a group, right? So sometimes it's just good to like rip off tiny little aspects of a blueprint that you find fun and convenient. So I did that. I separated them all, got them all ripped out, and I'm going to try to find places to use them. And now in terms of the backside of this building's horrendous, and I definitely don't want it to look like the front. And it shouldn't, but I also don't want it to look horrible either. So looking at what Frontier has done with their tiki builds, they kind of have this like nice like plaster wall piece, which is different from the bamboo in the front. They put like a nice trim on it. They get air conditioners, staff doors, windows, and lights, and then like a couple other things. So I'm using that as reference. And then now when I go build a build in the future, I'm like, I'm looking for plaster, AC, floor trim, and these lights, the resort wall lights, you know, and you get familiar with the pieces and how they should be used. And I definitely 100% stand, and then it crashed, and then the game crashed there. That's why it went black. But I 100% stand by the fact that you should look at other things as reference. Those windows work best. There's a reason Frontier used them. It's their intention. They were designed a certain way because that's how they were designed. They were intended to be designed that way. So I like to know what the intended piece was and not just make assumptions, because something might look off otherwise. And I'll come to my own decisions later, like, oh, I like using this window, or I like using this trim, or I personally prefer using these lights. And I'll come to all those decisions later. But it's better to play it safe. This is like basically a larger version of the Frontier mini builds, but then adding my own flair, adding my own touch, and making it much bigger, scaling it up, and adding my own decorations to what's important is the front half, the composition, my own signs on the back, and that sort of thing. So I wanted to add the Splash Emporium to the back so you know what it is, even if you go around the building. And, you know, just a few little decorations. Got another nod to Queen Splash there with the Splash poster on the back. And now it's like planters. You know, these are some of the planters I ripped out of the blueprint. They're a planter with 5 plants in it. It's a 6-piece blueprint that I stole from Frontier's blueprint. Saves me from finding those same 5 pieces. I highly recommend doing this. It's easy, it's quick. the planters are done for me, and I just put them around, call it a day. It really fills in the back quite nicely. And now I have this little task of figuring out, well, if you go inside this building, you don't want to see an empty box building. It breaks your immersion. So we got to fill that in. We have to build our own walls on the inside and make it look like it's a facility on the inside. So that's what I'm doing there, is just hiding all the guts and making it seem like it could really exist in real life. And then when you go in there, it should look and feel proper. So there we go. That's like the base. It's funny because we've been talking all this time, and we've been working and getting it. I'm explaining my process, but all of the work, I've often said this in the past, 90% of, sometimes the last 10% is 90% of the work, right? So far, this has been probably 8 hours of footage just to get to this point. And then the last hour or two of footage, which is literally the last 10 minutes of me talking, which is 10% basically of this video, this is where it all comes together, right? That last 10% is truly a massive transformation. This is just walls and 2 slides and a character in the middle. And now we're just going to take all these things, planters and surfboards and all sorts of things and lights and decorations and, you know, color them, retheme them, make them match our overall vision, and just fill. And then it's like, whoa, that made a massive transformation very, very quickly. And that's where I was saying, like, never really want to put your planters in, your, you know, even your trim or anything like that until you're absolutely 100% confident that you're not going to change the building. You're not going to change the shape or the layout. Get your composition the way you want it. Get your concepts working within it, and make sure everything's working the way you want it to work before you go and decorate anything. Because the last thing you want to do is rip something down and a bunch of decorations go with it, and right, that sort of thing. So yeah, this process that I've gone through it like 100 times in Planet Coaster 1, building it up, getting it to a point, and then the last hurrah is jazzing it up. And like I said, you can make any box look great with enough stuff. And this is where my building may not have looked the prettiest, it may not have looked the most enticing or exciting and that sort of thing, but you'll see once I get all these little decorations, these final touches in, it'll really come together. And then what I had in my mind is a final composition is the big front splash. So the gates, I guess, that lead you into this area, it's going to look like she's making a giant splash into a pool. And it's Queen Splash, it's the Splash Emporium, there's tubes, it'll all come together. And I think I nailed it on the vision aspect by getting the composition the way I wanted it to. It's just, you don't see the splash right now. I'll put it in at the end, but I had that in my head the whole time. It's going to kind of close it all in, make it one nice square blueprint plaza with all the final touches and personality and charm added in after. But like splash signs, surfboards, splash cover, got to move the lights a little bit, get all those little things in there. And then here we go. This is where I'm actually like, all right, it's time to do the big kahuna, the front splash. So just like her crown is making a splash, the Splash Emporium, the donuts making a splash into the water, we want her to look like she's making a splash in the overall composition. So we put the big waves in the front, and those effectively serve as the door. So as you're coming through the door, it looks like she's opened the door by splashing into the pool. And I thought that was great. And the main sign for this whole thing is behind her, right? And you don't want a sign, and there's a reason for that, because if you do a sign in front, it ruins the composition, right? So I purposely put the sign behind her so that nothing ever gets in her way, and she's always the focal point. However, I did want a sign in front. I wanted it to say Queen Splash somewhere in the front. But how do you do that without obscuring her, right? So, you want to put it on the ground as font on the ground, and you'll see me do that. It's cool. Wanted to add some flying balloons. I thought of using some of the other balloons, but I didn't want to make it feel too silly with balloons everywhere. So I just thought the one stingray was kind of nice. It gives a little bit of shade when you get to the top of the flumes. But yeah, so here we're making a Queen Splash. One thing I always recommend, grab your font, duplicate it, tuck it behind and color it a slightly darker shade. And that way it'll make it, it'll give it 2 tones, and it'll make it look a little 3D as well. And there we go, put Queen Splash on the ground, and I thought it looked great there. You look at it from a 3/4 angle, and you can see a sign, but the sign disappears as you walk up to it because it's on the ground. Now it's just time for all the pool doodads, the shade, the chairs, the benches, the lifeguard, the ladders and all that. And yeah, that is the final touches. You'll see me putting a couple things here, but it looks like I'm almost out of footage. So I think it's almost time to jump into game and take a closer look at it real time. Let's go do that, ladies and gentlemen. Queen Splash. All right, here we are in game. Here's a real-time look. This is what I was trying to say about the composition. I wanted to make it look like she's splashing into the water, and you can see it's Queen Splash. The sign is not obstructing her in any way, but it's still there depending on how you look at it. And I will show you the blueprints real quickly. Don't mind the alerts. So this is the Queen Splash. Links are in the description below. You can give this a download. When you place it, you will find that it's 3 pieces. It's her legs, and the ring. So you can kind of pose her, move her around, or just use her as she is, and you can use her as a centerpiece, plonk her down, but you shouldn't have too much of a hard time, reposing her if you want to make her like walking or something. You just have to rotate the feet or whatever, but you could technically have her in her sort of traditional pose, walking around if you so wanted to. Just takes a little bit of finagling, but she's not all one piece is my point. And then this is the second one. This is what it looks like when you download it. It's all ready to go. You have the lines, so you know where to line it up, right? Those lines. So you just get it to there. Boom, done. Super simple setup. And then from there, you're just gonna run your path. I think it would probably be a 10-foot path, maybe 9. There you go. That leads you on in. So that's how I would go about doing it. It does have these side areas if you want to actually, integrate it into your park a little differently. You could actually have more ways in or more ways out. So it is flexible that way, or you could even just drop it onto a pre-made plaza, right? If you have a big area, you can just plop it down on it. So plenty of easy ways to set it up and use it depending on how you want to. Let's take a look at it overall. I already have feedback for myself if I were showcasing this in a spotlight. What's missing here? A literal spotlight. This thing. There you go. See? How much better is that? So if you do download this blueprint, put a light there if you're going to run it at night. Just needs one light. Just to put the spotlight on her a little bit like that. But overall, the nighttime lighting turned out quite nice, I think. It is lit. It's subtle on the back, but vibrant in the front. As we walk around, it has those blues, pinks, and all that stuff. Maybe it could use a couple area lights in here. Maybe one in here. But I kind of was so tired at the time that I didn't really think too much about the nighttime lighting. Even though I had put lights in, I just didn't really do a QA pass at nighttime. You probably didn't even see it go nighttime in the speed build. So it definitely was a bit of an afterthought, as it is for most people. And that's okay. But during the daytime, I feel like I accomplished what I wanted to. Pink, blue, and white. It feels like Queen Splash. It feels like a tropical setting with the tropical plants behind. We have the thatched tiki huts and that sort of thing. And we get that resort vibe going here as we walk around. It feels like a tropical resort. Just so happened to be raining right now. That's not great. Got the change rooms. This is supposed to be the staff facilities. This is where you buy your pool pass. The Emporium. Get your all your donuts, right? And dryers. And then we can actually go inside the building. The slides are a little jank, but that's just this game. I feel like they need to improve the ride camera, because like this slide is okay, but wait till you see the bumps. And the bumps is a feature right here. Why does the camera go up and down when it goes over the bumps? That is actually supposed to be a feature where it adds fun to the ride. But the camera goes up, down, up, down. It should just stay straight and maybe just you bounce a little, right? The fact that it looks up, looks down, looks up, looks down, all so fast is kind of stupid. And I found that with a lot of the coaster elements in this, or not the coaster elements, the flume elements. Like that felt a little janky, but I was looking at the statistics, and honestly, that kind of extreme drop added so much of a fun factor for them. It got a 7 excitement, 4 fear, 2 nausea. It's a great slide, but from the POV, it kind of seemed crappy. I don't know, but I don't really care. At the end of the day, there's going to be guests going down it, and it's going to look really cool when you see a guest slide right over the sign or underneath the sign, between the sign, and again, slide out of that donut. It goes over top and then through the donut, which is great. So there she is, all happy, enjoying the sun. If you guys are playing career mode and you get to that tropical level, a sure thing, the one I'm enjoying, I'm probably going to put this in my career mode. We're not doing a career mode video here today. Normally Mondays and Fridays I do my career mode Let's Play, which is being delayed because of this build. So this is taking the place of it. But we built it, and now we get to use it for our sure thing career gameplay, and it's going to take up a nice chunk of the park, so we can fit that in somewhere, say that we built something custom for our career mode, and I'm happy with that. And through this process, I've found the tiki stuff to be pretty fun. I like it, but as I said, it is kind of limited in its size and scale. You don't really want to go too much bigger than this, because the moment you start to get bigger, you really should just go make these. This technically is Tropical Resort. It's more on the resort side and less on the tropical side, but it still has that tropics. It just uses wood instead of bamboo. It uses plaster on the walls, and you know, it still has these tropical plants and tropical pieces. It's just a little bit more modern resort style. So I kind of want to try making some of these as well, and I think it's going to be a mixture. Like if I'm doing a hot dog squad, probably makes sense to do a little tiki thing, have a bonfire and hot dogs roasting on the bonfire, and it's a tiki bonfire hot dog roast. That would be good for hot dog squad. But then, you know, maybe for these style buildings, we could do like a chief beef and have pizza pen in jail and the chief, and we use the car and recolor that as a chief mobile. You know, like I think for whatever shop you're using, tiki makes more sense, resort might make more sense, or a hybrid between the two, a combination of the two, but there's definitely like a reason to go either way. And I can definitely see myself building another build like this, maybe a bit smaller, like instead of wide and, you know, like a big pad, I do something a little bit smaller, but more vertical. And we can have Queen Splash like jumping off the top of a building and have a slide going down the building. And this is a great style build for that, because you have this kind of realism behind facility stuff behind here, which makes it like a facade, but the people can actually, the stairwells can go up here and they climb up that, and then they get to the pool, which is the docking bay, could be here, and then the slides go down, and then we could have like a Queen Splash up here or something instead of the Heyo sign. So I feel like there's definitely a version 2 that I can make that's more resort themed and less tropical theme, and maybe something I'll try. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I like how this turned out. I like the first taste of tropical, and now that I've built an understanding for the pieces and how Frontier uses them and how I would like to use them and come up with a combination of my own creative design, I definitely feel more comfortable diving into this theme again and discovering new ways to use the pieces. And that's how I recommend you treat this process. Find something that you like, build a small thing, work your way up. I did start too big, but this is building off my knowledge in Planet Coaster 1. It took me a while before I started making builds this big in Planet Coaster 1. And in fact, I would say this would have been a fine, dandy little build all on its own, just as a start, right? So, and even this was technically my first blueprint. She came before the rest, right? Anyways, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. I built her first and then the rest. So I did have like a bit of a warm up along the way. And yeah, that's pretty much all my tips, my advice, and a look at my actual build. What did you guys think of this? Did you learn something from it? Did it inspire you? Are you more excited about tropical? Is this something you want to try for yourself? I definitely like the tropical vibe. I highly recommend it. and I want to see more of it. And I especially want to see more of this stuff, the resort style build. So if you guys are inspired, get building, send your stuff in. The submission form is down in the description below, as well as the share codes and links to the builds that you've seen me make here today. And I think after this, we're gonna either do more Sandbox or jump back into our campaign. Every Monday and Friday, I'm trying to stay up with that. It's a little hard to do, but I'm gonna keep going with it. So I will see you guys on Friday with either career mode or another Sandbox build. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you then. Bye now.